All right, well, welcome everyone for today's discussion on AI in education, brought to you by OCCDLA on using AI with your students. My name is Kevin Steves. I am an instructional designer here at Lane Community College. And since we have a lot of people in the room, if you don't mind entering into the chat your name, what you teach, or what your kind of focus or discipline is, and what institution you call home. And if you're a part-time faculty member, maybe that's multiple institutions that you call home. So list them all. Interested to see who's in the room and who's a part of the discussion today. This session is one of a series of monthly discussions brought to you through the OCCDLA Professional Development Work Group. The AI in Education OCCDLA Planning Group members are, and if you're here, please give a wave. Beth Hale from Chemeketa Community College, Greg Kaminsky from Portland Community College, Sarah Miller from Tillamook Bay, myself from Lane, and Jess Wyness from Lynn Benton Community College. So thank you all for that team for helping to coordinate these and bring these discussions to the greater faculty community across the state. We've been hosting monthly discussions with a focus on AI in the community college. You can access previous recordings and resources from the following document that I'm going to drop into the chat here. And you can also find that we have a discussion coming up in March on assessment through a lens, the AI lens. So there's a link there that you can register for that session if you're interested. Today's discussion is on using AI with your students. This is a topic I know I've been hearing more and more about in our area of instructional design at Lane Community College. I think as faculty develop an understanding of generative AI and both its limitations and its potentials, the natural progression is adapting our instruction to learn how can we use this with students. I think it's a very valid question that I think every one of us in the room has. How can we use this with our students? So some kind of formatting for today. The first 30 minutes or so will be for Jess and Paul to share and have some discussion around how they're using AI with their students. And then we'll ask you to join breakout rooms based on your discipline and speak with other faculty or people in your subject areas or your focus areas of discipline to get further ideas. And we'll give you some questions to kind of help generate conversation. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Dr. Jess Wyness from Lynn Benton Community College. She's the department chair of the Center for Teaching of Excellence and also teaches education, geography, and first-year seminar courses. And we also have Paul Montone from Portland Community College, who is the English faculty and digital learning facilitator. Thank you so much for sharing with us how you've been using AI with your students. And I'm very excited to learn from both of you. And excited to hear what others kind of bring to the discussion and their experiences as well. So we'll be watching the chat. If you have any questions as you come up, you can add to the chat and we'll make sure to bring those to Jess and Paul's attention. So without further ado, Jess, if you want to kind of kick us off and get us started, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, Kevin, can you give me a thumbs up? You can see the screen there. It's good. Perfect. So I'm Jess Winans at Lynn Benton. Primary role is in Center of Teaching Excellence, but I do some teaching as well, and that's the part that we will talk about today. So before I jump into what like my courses and how I've used this with students, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the course that I was experimenting in last fall, as well as kind of my own background. So I am not the person who has like ChatGPT up in a window all the time. I don't use it regularly. I don't know that much about it. And I haven't done all that kind of personal exploration. Like it's basically not my thing. But when I went into teaching, I felt like it was really important to have students, to teach students what I could share with them and kind of learn with students together with generative AI because we were hearing so much about it. And I'm saying that because I hear a lot of faculty in my other work say like, well, I just don't understand. And that's kind of where I came to this as well, is I didn't understand. I kind of did my best with my students, and my students overall really loved the opportunity to play with some AI in their assignments. So I'll go over more of that today. So I use this in an Ed 216 course in the fall. It was a fully online course. I addressed AI in the syllabus, but again, I didn't really know what I was doing. So I was kind of copying and pasting from other places to basically say, you can't use AI, generative AI. It is kind of not following academic integrity for some work, but we will when it is called out. I'll be asking you and kind of teaching you how to use AI in other places. I talked about this throughout the whole entire class. So I had demonstration videos, I had examples. So I was doing this like teaching of the students for those who were unfamiliar with the idea. I also surveyed my students about AI. I'll share a little bit of that today. And then I developed 2 assignments that incorporated AI that I'll go over. So I started, I'm talking to my students about AI this whole course in my midterm feedback where I asked a whole bunch of questions. Part of what I asked the students was like, have you used AI? How, why? Only 2 of my students said that they had used AI in this particular class I was teaching, and it was usually for, brainstorming or something along those lines. But there were some other patterns that I found in student responses. There was this big kind of like, I want to learn. I'm in college and I want to learn, and just copying and pasting from AI takes away from my learning. That came up for a couple folks. A lot of students who are more familiar used it for like kind of some real quick responses. There was one student who had watched another student go through an academic integrity process and kind of was scared of that work. And so really was saying like, it needs to be my own work. That's really important to me. And then you see students using it for summaries here as we kind of go down. And then there were a couple students that responded like, I've used it other places, but I haven't used it in this particular class. And I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of why I think that is from some of my other conversations with students. And then finally, I heard from students like, I want someone to teach me. I want to understand how I can use this in my classes in a kind of ethical, forming with academic integrity way. So this is a picture you can see. This is like my trying to be really excited about AI, teaching it to students kind of face up in the top here. But I actually did some demonstrations with them that was in line with the expectations I was setting for them. So where I had an expectation that they were going to be using generative AI in an assignment, I kind of modeled that assignment for them. Like, what would it look like to go through and use, in this case, ChatGPT, to ask questions to kind of get to the answer I was expecting from my students. And so we started like right at the beginning, like how do you even get into ChatGPT? Like I felt it was really important to give them all the skills and kind of all the context for this work. So getting to my assignments. So I had 2 different assignments. You're only going to see parts of them here. And so in this first assignment that you can see, this is part of a bigger book assignment. They read a book and they had to make an annotation at the end. With their annotation, I asked them to kind of do a 3-parter. They had to write a draft annotation, submit that. Then they had this option that you can see posted as number 5 here as reviewing your annotation. And I gave the students the option of either using ChatGPT, or I actually accepted any kind of AI, or using the LBCC Writing Center. In my head, I was then going to do a comparison between the students' projects to see the kind of different outcome, because the third part of this was that they had to then modify their assignment based on what they learned from this review piece of it. None of my students used the LBCC Writing Center, even though there was an online option. All the students chose the ChatGPT option. And then I asked them to reflect on what was different, what did you learn, kind of how did you change your annotation that you had written for this book based on what you learned from ChatGPT or other generative AI. This is an example of a student assignment. So at the top, you can see just kind of the tail end of what they had written from their book. And then in the middle here, you see this piece of their reflection about using ChatGPT for their annotation. And then at the very bottom, they got down into kind of the piece about making a new annotation and any changes. This student, along with many students, their biggest takeaway was essentially AI uses bigger words than I would use in my writing. So it's more formal, it's more sophisticated. Some students said it just wouldn't sound like me. Like, I don't think I could cheat using this because it wouldn't sound like me because of the way that it is written. That, more than anything else, was what I saw in student reflections here. And I do think as we're all learning, that reflective piece is really critical. Asking students to go back and say, how was it to use that? Why what did you get out of it? Why would you use it in the future? Why wouldn't you use it in the future? But the themes I saw from students are, yeah, really big words, sometimes more details, or sometimes just a more kind of sophisticated way of summarizing. Like I heard from some students, like, I actually didn't know what it meant to summarize, despite some of the resources I gave them for building an annotation. Like they still didn't really know what that meant. And so they could see an example from generative AI and had this kind of little click of like, oh, I understand now more what it looks like, what an annotation would look like. And they could kind of go from there to modify their final project. And so this was a kind of multi-step piece of the assignment. And this was the first example of how I asked students to use generative AI in the class. The second example was part of their final project. And so you're just, again, getting a little snippet of my directions. The final project started with a series of questions that students could choose from. So they had to answer one big overarching question for the class. And then I gave them different options of how they wanted to answer that question. One of the options was this number 3 here, to have a generative AI response and analysis. Other options were, writing a paper. There were different kind of ways that they could answer this. I would say about a third of the class chose the AI response for this particular project. And what I was really asking them to do here was to critique the AI response to the questions that they were being asked. So they would start with this big overarching question that I had given to them, and then they would kind of go down through kind of finer detail as they were asking questions of AI. So a student piece here, this is part of a 14-page document that I got back from the student. I've grayed out the student's name. This student kind of showed me the conversation that the student was having with AI, what questions the student was asking, and then the responses. And then this student used a comment function in Google Docs to link back to mostly the textbook, but in some cases other resources as well, and say kind of why or why not what ChatGPT had given the student was accurate. And so as I looked at assignments like this and students did it in different formats, there was a fair amount of critical thinking involved in both the questions, like how students were fine-tuning the questions to really get a response that worked for them. They might start at a really high level and then they might get narrow. They might kind of redirect. They might say back to AI, I didn't understand this point. Can you say more here? And so they're really learning how to use the tool. And then they had to go back into other resources and kind of give a critique or their understanding of the responses that they found. They also had a reflective piece here. And in the reflective piece, in this particular use of AI, where they were asking this big question, what I saw most from students trending was just kind of the generalization of the AI responses, that they were very high level, that a student probably would have answered in some more specific details, and that it took some work to really get AI to give some of the specifics that they felt would have been expected from them to be able to answer the question. So that was a whole bunch of things that kind of came into the that one class. The lessons that I learned from this overall were both like, I don't want students using AI in all of their assignments, right? Like I was trying to control and teach a little bit where students could use this well. And so ways that I found to limit generative AI use, and this was both from just kind of experimentation and conversations with students, are at the top. And for both of these, I've put for now. Anytime I'm talking about generative AI use, I think this like for now piece is really important, because for now, we're not seeing really strong citations, accurate citations with generative AI use, but I expect that to change. And so as we're kind of going through all these things, as we're learning and experimenting in classes, I think that for now piece is really essential. So limiting generative AI use for now, putting in a syllabus statement. We have a lot of really great examples that were shared in a previous OCCDLA meeting, so everyone can go back and look at those. Talking to students like throughout the whole course, like just kind of picking their brains, learning with them, kind of going along. I'd hear from students and some of the feedback I got of like, other faculty just pretend this doesn't exist, and it's so refreshing to hear you actually talk about it, right? And so I think that some faculty, If you think that if you just don't talk about it, students aren't going to use it, or they just aren't going to know that it's there because you're not talking about it, that's not where our students are right now. They want you to be talking about it. They want you to kind of acknowledge where it makes sense to use it and where it doesn't. Asking questions that require the use of specific sources, and this is an important piece, particularly content that may not be available to generative AI, so content in the LMS, a textbook, something that was developed from the course, and then requiring citations. Students expressed some frustration to me, like, oh, I couldn't use AI for this because it had to come from the text, or you were asking me to pull all these things from course discussions and kind of synthesize. And while AI could do that, it would probably be really time consuming to do some of those pieces. So this was definitely a limiting factor. Asking students to make personal connections was the same way. AI could generate that for you, but most students tended not to want to do that, right? It felt really inauthentic for them to do that. Similarly, kind of creating kind of patterns throughout the class, going back to something and then going forward and going back to something going forward, limited the AI use. And then I'd always experiment. If I was going to ask students a question, I'd pop it in and see what a response might be. So I had some idea of, not necessarily that I was looking for them to be cheating through AI, but I thought it was worthwhile for me to know what a response might be. And then the kind of part we're talking about here is like, how do you actually encourage it? This teaching piece, I think, is still really essential. Like, talk about your learning, talk about what you know, talk about what responsible and ethical use of generative AI is, what that means specifically for you in your class, demonstrating for them. And again, you don't need to be like a high-level user to do that. Demonstrating can just be asking a question, going through with the class, kind of critiquing what that might look like, and then also providing examples for what you're expecting of their work. I wanted to set clear expectations when I was making my assignments, but they were also a little thrown together because I was just learning and it was the first time through on this course. And so I found by having the expectations, but not specifically saying this is exactly what you need to do, like push this button here and give me this exact format, I found a lot of flexibility and creativity. I was learning from the students, like I was seeing new things. I was thinking of things in different ways, or they'd use it in a different way that I hadn't really thought of when I was creating the assignments. And so this is, again, just like, you don't need to know. I think it's okay to kind of throw it out there with students with some expectations around it and see what they're coming back with. I felt at this time in the fall that it was really important to provide alternative assignment options to students and not force them into using AI. I think as it becomes more and more familiar with our students, that might change a little bit, but especially in community colleges, we still see this really significant digital divide. And I didn't want to disadvantage students by the requirement of AI. I think even the students who chose not to use AI in the assignments still learned a lot about AI through the course. But there were students who were uncomfortable with kind of the idea of it. And then I was just really transparent with my students that we were learning together. I asked them for feedback on the assignments. I asked them how I could do it better next time. And that, I think, made a huge difference with the dynamic of my students, that we were all kind of going through this all together. So that's what I have. It's a lot. I'm happy to answer questions later. Kevin, if you want to jump in now.
Thanks. Yeah, I threw one in the chat. We're figuring we'd get to it when we had a moment. I'm wondering, because I've heard this kind of before too, is through the use of AI through different projects or assignments inside their course, an indirect result is actually improvement of some writing skills. I've actually seen it in myself, and I'm wondering if you, because the comments of AI uses bigger words than I do or puts it in a little bit different way. Do your students feel like their writing has actually improved as kind of an indirect result of that experience?
I think that a lot of students made changes to, particularly in the annotation. I wasn't asking that so much in the second assignment, but in the annotation assignment, a lot of students just kind of finessed how they put that together. And an annotation is a really great writing example because it asks you to be kind of really concise, and they had a short number. And so the students did become more concise. They changed how they were conveying their ideas through writing after seeing AI.
That's really cool. Any other questions for Jess before we move on to Paul? And we can continue to have a discussion too after the breakout rooms as well. Jess, thank you. It was really exciting. I think, the one of the points you made is going over the ethical considerations around AI and the outputs. I found that that can be sometimes the most powerful teaching moment, is it when we give examples or model out the outputs and then going over and asking questions. Where do we see bias? Is the information here copyrighted or not? All these different considerations is a really big teachable moment. So I appreciate you kind of bringing that out.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jess, very much. Paul from Portland Community College.
Hey, thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Jess. Nice to see everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Paul Montone from Portland Community College, as Kevin said, and I teach English and writing, and I also work with our online learning department. And hello from all my fellow colleagues from PCC who are here. It's great to see you. I'll have a few things to say before I get started, and I'll share my screen, and there'll be quite a bit of overlap with what Jess presented in terms of kind of how AI was set up in the examples we just saw. But anyway, I mean, like everybody else, it was kind of learning as I go what these tools actually mean, what they are, what the implications are. So, as we know, AI was, ChatGPT. There was a New York Times or the daily podcast that featured it. And I guess this was like November, December of 2022. And I did not have a writing course coming up that winter term. I actually had a hybrid. So uh, I talked with it about my students, but I haven't really done anything with it yet. I just kind of, felt it out with them and had some conversations. So managed to get through the term, without major problems. And I think because of that Zoom interaction with them in that hybrid course, uh, and because it was an English class, I think they were kind of more willing. As a film studies class on animation, they're more willing to really just kind of engage in that class more authentically. I was more concerned about my writing 115 course, which is, a basic introduction to college comp class. I didn't teach it that spring. I was going to teach it this summer, so summer of 2023. And that was my sort of pilot term. I was going to see how it went. I didn't really say much about AI in the course. Our college in our SAC, our subject area committee, hadn't really formulated a statement or syllabus statement about AI yet. We did that over the summer and gave our faculty in our department kind of three options. I was part of that work group, as was Greg Kaminsky and Johnny Zackel, who presented with one of the last presentations. So I was just really feeling things out and to see how things went. And I got enough of the Chat GPT vibes going on. I knew stuff was coming in that I was very suspicious about. And most depressingly was ChatGPT being used as the basis for their peer review letters. I just thought this is really depressing, just this prospect of we're not even, present for our colleagues in this class when we're sharing our peer review letters and our feedback. And I was like, what am I even doing here? What are we even doing here? This is a sad state of things. So this was like, okay, I'm going to come up with something for fall. So in fall term, I rolled out some new materials. I revised essentially the first 2 weeks of my class to focus primarily on AI. So I'll share my screen. And this will have some overlap with Jess, and I did not create a PowerPoint. So I hope these things are visible enough. With my self-introductions for my students, I asked them as one of the things, what your experience with AI language tools like ChatGPT has been, if you've used them. I had a number of students who weren't familiar with it, or maybe they said they weren't because they were a little worried about what I might say. But in general, I didn't get the sense that a lot of people were really familiar with the tools. Some were, some said that, they had used them in some classes. Nobody admitted to, like, yeah, I use it all the time and I'm going to use it in your class. It wasn't like that, but, at least just kind of feeling it out from there. One of the first lessons that I really got into it, and it was a 3-part lesson, which ended with an assignment discussion, is called Your Voice is Magic. And so that was sort of like the name of the module and the way I was setting this up, because I really wanted to focus about the authenticity of voice and the experience of students using writing as a tool to discover um, their thinking, to go through that process of their thinking. How do you think? What does your thinking look like? What do you arrive at through your process as a writer and a thinker? So, I was pretty heavy-handed with it in terms of like, I want to hear from you. So, the script of the first lesson or lecture was, I'm here to tell you something rather simple and yet rather profound. It may seem childish, but it is not. The thing I want to tell you is this: your voice is magic. It really is, truly. And so I really spelled things out for them. There is a policy statement, but I really wanted to make it part of the narrative of the course. And so at the end of this page, and this kind of narrative carried on throughout, the first several weeks of the class. But I said, there's the issue of plagiarism, but that's not what concerns me the most. People who cheat are going to cheat. It will catch up with them one day. What concerns me is the loss of the human voice, the ease of giving one's agency over to an algorithm and machine created by, in many instances, business interests that put profit over people. And so from there, I had students move through a couple lessons, and I integrated the PCC has a a a lecture series called the Carolyn Moore Poet Series. So national poets are brought in to stay at residency at PCC. And so I brought in the work of these young poets as a way to connect students with the campus activities and to connect them to young writers with these really authentic voices. So the first exercise, which was a discussion, was to watch a video of this slam poet, Jay Nichelle, performing a poem about anxiety. And then I asked them to say, what did you think about, this person's voice? How did you relate to it? And then I had AI generate a poem, which I probably would have been more effective if I had just recorded myself reading it. So interesting, the responses to that. Oh, I'm not there yet. The responses were, as you might imagine, I really related to the individual speaker. The poem generated by AI, didn't seem as authentic. So then, I carried this forward with this idea of voice. I had them, let's take a look. I had them with their first paper assignment write about place. And as part of that paper assignment, I had them read a couple more of these authors from the Carolyn Moore residency. And I had students in a discussion preparing for their own work talk about their experience as readers reading these samples of authors talking about place. But with that, I also created a page that was me showing them AI's response to the prompt that they were going to write about. So I will share this video with you, and you should be able to see and hear this. Hey everybody, it's Paul here again. I just wanted to share my screen and you're going to be reading an AI generated essay about place as part of your preparation for your work. Reading a couple samples of authors who are part of the Carolyn Moore um, um, residency this year through PCC. I've provided information about that. But I just want to show you the process here. Let me go to this window. I've got ChatGPT pulled up. So this is what it looks like if you've never seen it before. You got your um, previous chats or inquiries there. So I'm just going to cut. I've taken the instructions from writing instructions for the exercise this week. I'm going to put in the prompt, cut and paste, and let's see what it comes up with. Rediscovering serenity, a hidden gem in the mountains. So as you can see, it's cranking out some writing, and it looks like it's done. And I'm going to cut and paste this and put this into the page where you'll be reading this essay, this generated essay. So we can talk about our experience as readers with this, with our discussion this week as well. Okay, thanks. Just wanted to share that with you for those of you who were curious. So that's that. Okay, be well. Reach out with any questions. Okay, so that was the video, and then the essay was posted here as part of that work to read some essays by Carolyn Moore authors and the ChatGPT. And the discussions that came in were pretty insightful. This first one here, talking about Emily Prado, who is a real person, explored how place isn't always physical, but emotional, so societal and cultural. AI can collect data and string it together coherently with the help from humans, but only humans can collect information, work it out in our heads, and form opinions, unique thoughts, and true knowledge from the information we receive. ChatGPT's essay lacked the spontaneity and creativity that Prado and Hernandez's writings possessed. And this is what I posted on the announcements page. So all the kind of neat ideas from all the students were collected, and I made them into announcements for the week, just to reiterate this. Another one, I feel the main difference I am noticing with the real person's work over a bot's is the bot always seems to try and be positive, while a real author is trying to give it to you as real as they possibly can. It seems like no matter what, the AI's essay would have some kind of positive outcome at the end, which I thought was a really insightful observation about the writing. So this continued on for the next assignment, which was a summary assignment. And I had students compare and contrast their own writing with the writing of ChatGPT. And so I know for the sake of time, one of these was about Amy Tan's essay, Fish Cheeks, and then Gary Soto's essay, The Pie. ChatGPT summary on Fish Cheeks. It's really well written, and I would say pretty perfectly sums up the essay in a precise and concise way. Its summary on The Pie, on the other hand, is very strange and inaccurate. I don't believe Gary Soto directly mentions a Mexican-American neighborhood in his essay. ChatGPT seemed to have misunderstood the setting, stating the protagonist finds himself alone in the kitchen with a freshly baked apple pie, and he succumbs to the temptation. When in the essay, the boy steals an entire pie from a store, which is a very important detail to the story. And then down at the bottom in the summary, the AI gave for Audre Lorde's 4th of July completely leaves out her age and her family's responses to discrimination, which I believe is a big part of her story, including a particular main point or specific detail is extremely important because there may be a piece of information that might help a reader get a better understanding. So it was really helpful for them to see the things that ChatGPT did well and not do well with all this kind of like work to really underscore their, you know, their opportunity to learn from their own thinking. And that was one of the things I asked them at one point when it came to ChatGPT and what you were reading with AI generated stuff and what you were reading from the work of real people was, how might this exercise help demonstrate the difference between information and knowledge? And so that kind of knowledge was really based on personal experience and wisdom and how you can develop unique insights through your own voice. So with the assignments too, I did allow for some parameters to say, okay, if you were to use AI in your paper, how might you use it? So, hey, if you're stuck with coming up with a title, you might summarize your paper or put it in and see what it comes out with. Or you might use it as like a thesaurus coming up with some descriptions of a place. But also making sure you let me know where and how it was used. I don't know if that was a good strategy or what. I was just experimenting with stuff, so certainly my approach will change. So we'll have to see. I'll be teaching the class again this spring, and I'll be doing further revisions with kind of everything that I've learned since this last class was taught. So thank you for my time, and excuse me, thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot, Paul. This is really amazing. I'm wondering if there's questions from the audience before we open up the breakout rooms.
And was I sharing my screen? Okay, good. I was like, did I
Yeah.
just get through that and not share my screen? I've done that before.
I have a quick question for you. I don't know. It seems as though you've really taken kind of an open approach to AI in your course, and you seem very open with your students. And also, I like how Jess kind of framed it as kind of, we're not experts in this area, learning alongside of our students. Is that kind of what you found? Is you're learning a lot from your students as well as them from you, and kind of exploring this and growing with this together?
Yeah, I really felt that my students were learning alongside of me. They were really interested in it. I did not require anybody to sign up. I did not want to have students, do anything they weren't comfortable with. So it really was exploratory, observational, and just for information and just for the experience.
Right. That's amazing. Thanks, Paul. All right, I think we are gonna go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. I'm gonna throw a link into the chat. I'm gonna make sure I get the right link. For the questions, we've got 3 questions that we're gonna help kind of drive the conversations inside your breakout rooms. So what we're gonna ask you to do is try to join a breakout room that's close or within your discipline to get to speak to faculty that are within your area to help kind of understand maybe what they're doing with students and how you can share relative information for them too, and how you're using it with students. The link in there will take you to a Google Doc where anyone with the link can edit. So please add your notes to the questions that we have based on your group. Just a little note, please don't put identifying information, because this link is shared out and will be on our resources for later for any other faculty to kind of access. So with that, I think, Greg, are we ready for the breakout rooms to?
Yeah, we are ready. So what, about 15 minutes, Kevin? And then
Yeah,
we'll
I think
come back to
about, it's at 12,
because we're
12:40. So maybe let's say around
yeah,
10 minutes and then kind of come
10
back.
minutes. Yeah, 10 minutes and come back and regroup. All right, here we go.
Okay.
Hopefully there is something in there that's close to your subject area. So Kevin, should we go ahead and stop the recording at this time?
Yes, thank you.